Good afternoon. I'm your host. Welcome to the plantation, Master Gabriel. Interesting developments in the South African football scene. Not too long ago, we had these alleged, or should I say, the soon to be suspended Safa president, South African Football Association, Dr. Danny Jordaan. Now, the disgusting allegations of fraud and theft and maladministration, basically using public funds and misrepresenting them and using them for your own personal use without the authorization of the Safa board. Now, this gets interesting, very, very interesting. According to the article that was written on the 18th of November 2024 by Khomotso Mokoena from Sunday World. Now, what it states is that Safa NEC members are taking the fight to President Danny Jordaan, who appeared at the Palm Ridge Specialized Commercial Crown Court on Wednesday for fraud and theft amounting to 1.3 million rand and for irregularity, or should I say, for irregularly using the association's funds. Now, a number of NEC members who spoke to Sunday World are calling for Jordaan, who was released on 20,000 rand bail, to step down pending the outcome of the case. This just makes absolute sense. Just bear in mind, you a high-profile figure in the football world, or should I say the football governance world of South Africa. Now, you are caught with your hands in a cookie jar and you have misused funds inappropriately. Surely, what would be the correct thing to do? As a serving president of the South African Football Association, you're governed by a bunch of statutes and also obviously code of conduct that you need to adhere by because you are in a particular leadership position. Now, what would the sane and capable man with a mind like that do? You resign, or you would basically be suspended or should be suspended pending the investigation into the allegations of fraud and theft. Now, I ask myself this question. Yes, the National Executive Committee from Safa, the members are all calling for the resignation of the president to step down, because if you're caught in a storm like this, why would you still want to be president of the South African Football Association? Basically, you're dragging the organization's name and its reputation through the mud by your dealings and your actions. Second to that, what credibility does it show that Safa can withhold, or should I say Safa may impose its governance on his leadership? Because in all fairness, no executive committee member in Safa is above the law. So we also need to understand the part of Danny Jordaan. You're not above the law. Yes, you might be a high-profile sporting governance figure. However, you still need to represent that body ethically, accordingly, on the field and off the field, in the boardrooms, in negotiations, in the dealings of South Africa, representing its national interests on a global stage and also on a local stage. You need to represent accordingly. Now, if those standards of governance are flouted by its own leaders, such as Dr. Danny Jordaan, then surely the noble thing to do is to step down as president of Safa. But we haven't heard that, and the NEC members are calling for the suspension of the person as president of Safa, which in right mind, that is the correct thing to follow, because there are sponsors involved in this. There are stakeholders involved in this, because what credibility does it show that the organization, that means if leadership can commit any form of corruption, whether it's maladministration, whether it's fraud or theft, automatically that absolves you. So therefore, if I commit corruption and I do all these heinous things while I'm in a leadership and strategic role in the Football Governing Association, I would not take accountability because I regard myself above the law. Now, the same thing needs to apply. SAFA is all about governance, so therefore you need to instill your ethics and your code of conduct not only on its stakeholders, but also the board members and the leadership that is currently managing the organization. So, according to this article that was written by Sunday World on November the 18th, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to delve into this particular situation because I am a bit disappointed to a certain extent, not in the fact that the NEC members are taking the fight to Danny Jordan. It's just the fact that Danny Jordan, if you are being arrested by police, hawks, doesn't matter, for your involvement in theft and fraud of misappropriating an association's funds, wouldn't you just fucking announce your resignation or tell the football community, the stakeholders, do a public press release and state, hey, this is my intent. I have been caught, or it is alleged that I'm involved in some form of maladministration and fraud and theft of association's funds, so therefore I'm stepping down as president of Safa. That would be the right fucking thing to do in the meantime while the investigation is ongoing. However, this motherfucker right here does not seem to want to step down. Now, I cannot understand what is the fact that people, because of their position and their privilege and power, they think that they're above the law. So it's okay for President of Safa to commit fraud and not step down from his position. I mean, what confidence are you telling your stakeholders? What confidence are you spreading towards your investors? What confidence are you spreading towards the clubs, the teams, the franchises that make up the football community of South Africa, that it's okay for a leader to partake in these types of acts and therefore go unaccountable for and untouchable for that? That's bullshit to me. That's fucking complete fucking bullshit. So you want to tell me that Mr. Danny Jordan, the infamous Danny Jordan, the man that was secretly behind the 2010 FIFA World Cup bid. We all know that FIFA has a scandal of accepting bribes. And we also know that in 2010 with the World Cup and the bid for South Africa hosting the World Cup, there was some kind of back-end exchanges involved. Now, besides this 1.3 million rand that is actually on the books of Safa, remember, this 1.3 million rand is now a loss to the association because it's on their books. It's on their books. Firstly and foremost, let's just go into what this man did with the fucking money. I mean, if you got access to 1.3 million and worth of funds from an association, what the fuck were you thinking of doing these things? Let's delve into this quickly. So, according to the Sunday World, so they're taking the fight to President Danny Jordan, who appeared in the Palm Reach Specialized Commercial Crime Court on Wednesday for fraud and theft, accounting to 1.3 million and for irregularly using the association's funds. That is the gist of it. Now, a number of NEC members who also spoke to Sunday World are calling for Jordan to step down. Bear in mind, Danny Jordan was also released on bail for 20,000 rand. Let's not forget that. Jordan will again appear in the court on the 5th of December 2024, where the case will continue. That is for docket disclosure. He appeared in the court with his co-accused, Safa's chief executive officer, as well as the CFO, Groni Kluyo, and GRIT communications director, Trevor Nietlow. Now, NEC member Gladwin White has written a letter which the Sunday World has seen to the Association and the National Executive Committee, requesting that Jordan be temporarily suspended together with the Chief Executive Officer, Lydia Monyepau. I do apologize if I haven't pronounced it correctly. Lydia Monyepau, for failing to fulfill her role as a sole accounting officer of the association. That is, by all means, everyone that is complicit in this particular case of theft and fraud should be held accountable. And as the chief accounting officer, besides the CFO, this is under your watch and under your mandate as a CEO to oversee and also to exercise thorough judgment. Now, in this particular instance, this 1.3 million rand was misused from the association under the CEO's watch. So what does that say? You also have to suffer the same fate as the president himself, because you are the chief accounting officer beside the CFO that this came past, and you therefore did not do a damn fucking thing. So, in all fairness, all the accomplices need to do the same thing and step down as well. Jordaan's arrest has split the association in the middle because those backing him said that he should continue running the association, arguing that there is no step aside policy at Safa. Interesting. Just like the ANC ruling party, the African National Congress, they do have a step aside policy. However, in the South African Football Association, there is no step aside policy. So that means if you are allegedly caught in any form of irregularities, whether that be financial, personal, theft, misappropriation of funds, whatsoever in any form, just because you're in the leadership role inside Safa and you're serving on the board, that means there's no step aside policy. So technically, you can remain president while you are still appearing in court, while the allegations are now becoming factual and you are fingered in them and you get arrested and yet you still believe that you should remain president. What a fucked up situation is that? Where is the accountability? Where are the king codes of good governance being applied here? So the step aside policy doesn't apply in Safa under any given circumstances. I can commit fraud, steal the association's money, and while I'm in a leadership role or while I'm serving as a board member in any strategic decision-making role, I don't have to step down. I do not have to step aside either because there's no step aside policy. That is a complete load of dog shit right there. That just shows me the credibility and the lack of being a man in a situation like this. So then you're done with all your privilege and your power that you have and control over Safa and all your backers, all your fucking backers in the South African Football Association. Where are the fucking celebs? The so-called colored football community, these high-profile people that are not saying shit about Danny Jordaan. I wanted to come to that point, and the reason why I'm raising this is that when a black man commits corruption in the state, whether it's provincial government, national government, or local government, and it gets exposed and opened out in the media, there's always a massive backlash. Now I ask myself this million-dollar question. Why are the colored folks so fucking silent? The so-called colored folks. We're going to get back to this point. Let's go to the article of Sunday World quickly. White's letter, pursuant to the authority vesting under the Safa statutes, I hereby submit this motion requesting an urgent convening of the NEC. This requisition is prompted by the impending court appearance of the Safa president on charges of fraud, theft, and maladministration. The circumstances necessitate immediate review and deliberation by the NEC to uphold Safa's governance integrity and to assure continuity in leadership and operations. White stated that the meeting items would, or should I say, should include the suspension of the two. Suspension of the Safa president and CEO for ethical and governance compliance. That is, according to White's letter, the submission to the NEC of Safa. That is what the letter stated what needs to happen. White stated that the meeting items would include those two, as well as the Safa president should be temporarily suspended to allow an unimpeded investigation and to restore partner confidence. Similarly, the CEO should be suspended for failing to fulfill a role as a sole accounting officer. Remember, I mentioned this in the discussion not too long ago. Same WhatsApp group. Same process needs to be followed. She also needs to be suspended because this happened under her watch. Another NEC member said, we will pursue at least between 18 to 30 Safa regions to submit motions for an extraordinary Congress. Both processes will run parallel and will explore a variety of articles to charge him. Then suspend his motherfucking ass. Well, the word motherfucking ass is not in there. I'm just amplifying that shit right there. And force him to eventually resign, said an anonymous NEC member. This is now all according to the Sunday World. The article was written on November the 18th, 2024. We cannot be led by someone who is out on bail. Oh my fuck. You are absolutely spot on. Who the fuck wants to run a football association by someone that just got out of bail? What fucking credibility is that to the football community of South Africa? What lack of value does that show that you can be led by a criminal, by someone who just received bail and got out of bail and now has to lead a football governing association in South Africa? That is fucking disgusting. People should not be blinded by loyalty. We owe it to the country and do the right thing and charge him for bringing the association to disrepute. Yes, absolutely correct. The anonymous NEC member stated it explicitly. He brought the organization into disrepute, so therefore you cannot be run by a fool that has just gotten out from bail. Hell fucking no. Safa Vice President Bennett Bailey hit back at Jordan's antagonists. We are fully behind the president and that's why we are supporting Jordan. Well, the Vice President Bennett Bailey, maybe this Bennett Bailey is also a benefactor from Jordan at some point in time. Because why on earth would you endorse and support someone that has been allegedly caught for misusing funds, fraud and theft and maladministration at the South African Football Association? What kind of a vice president are you that you fucking endorse a fraudster? We all know that 2010 World Cup is still also going to come into the spotlight because of the bribes and the backhand exchanges that allowed South Africa's bid to go through so that we will be probably the first African country to host the World Cup. No one is talking about that. Now we all know who was all involved in that exchange. Some FIFA lead officials as well as Dr. Danny Jordan himself. The fucking infamous Danny Jordan. Now come on, man. South Africa, this is just bullshit. The fact that you got a vice president of a football association publicly acknowledging and endorsing and supporting a fucking fraudster that just misappropriated an association's funds. And you out here telling us, no, we support him. Oh, fuck you too. Danny Jordan, fuck you and your loyal supporters. You dragged the organization into a shitty mess. Your leadership capabilities has made Safa what it is today, a complete fucking mess. Because guess what? This is what power does to people. The moment people taste power, they feel that nothing can happen to them. And Daniel Dunn, you are one fucking example of people that when they are in power, they think that nothing can happen to them. Let's get back on this article. The way forward is simple. We continue with business as usual and the business of football. Bafana are playing important fixtures this weekend. Congratulations for Bafana advancing to the AFCON qualifiers and also qualifying for the African Cup of Nations. Congratulations to them. On top of that, people cannot plot and try and put motions in place, but we are not worried. I do apologize, I've just got a call coming in, just hold on. It is frivolous things and accusations. They are just clutching at straws. And we know that when we get to the court to respond, we will respond and show that they have no leg to stand on, added Bailey. Now this Bennett Bailey, which is the vice president of Safa, which is the supporter of Danny Jordan. Now, second to that, as the anonymous NEC member mentioned, you cannot be run by someone that has just gotten out of bail. Now, where are the colored people, man? Where the fuck are the colored people? The colored sports celebs. Where's Benny McCarthy? Not saying shit about Danny Jordan. Minister Gayton McKenzie, come on, man. You have to publicly call out this gentleman for his actions. This man appeared in court. You quiet. What about the women's Safa coach, head coach? Desiree, come on, man. Why is no one saying shit? But when it's a black politician, everyone wants to fucking lambaste him publicly on platforms, YouTube, social media, Twitter, or should I say now X, Facebook, everywhere. But now it's one of your own people. one of the colored people's own leadership. Where's Fadil Adams from the NCC calling out Danny Jordan? Why is everyone silent? We want to always point the finger and say, yes, it's cadre deployment, it's black politicians causing corruption. No, it's one of your own colored people that's in a high level role in an organization that oversees governance of South Africa's football community. There's a reason why it's called the South African Football Association. Otherwise, they could have named it anything else. South African fucking association for what I care. But where are the colored people now? The colored sports celebs, the colored sports leaders that are in the football fraternity, not saying a damn fucking thing. And yet you want to preach and say, oh, the government is bad, the government is stealing. Yet you got one of your very own representatives coming from the colored community that has just fucking committed fraud and that had appeared in court for his actions along with his co-accused. And you are sitting here not giving a fuck. That to me is hypocrisy. That's hypocrisy. Because on the one hand, you want to blame the black politicians and the black connected elite for fraud and corruption committed in the state. And on the other hand, the very same representatives from your own community, from the so-called colored community, no one is saying shit about Danny Jordan. But I will say the shit. I don't give a fuck about Danny Jordan. He needs to take accountability for his actions. I'm not going to stand for that shit. The people that are playing in grassroots level, the people that are suffering, that cannot seem to make a name for themselves when it comes to the sports fraternity, especially football. These are the people that will going to be suffering in the long term. Because what type of leaders are we allowing to represent our sports interests in South Africa? Is this the type of leadership that we should embody? I always say this. It's not the man, Danny Jordan, that I hate. It's the man that he embodies. That's the fucking person I hate. In all fairness, I don't hate Danny Jordan. I hate the man that he has become. And this type of shit, it's unacceptable. So in all fairness, Dr. Danny Jordan, while you are still the Safa president, step the fuck down. Wait for the investigation to be concluded and then make amends. You are guilty. Take accountability along with your co-accused. Take full accountability and step down. We don't need this type of shit in South Africa. Our sports heroes are performing well on and off the field. We don't need this type of shit. Bafana is doing well. We don't need this type of shit. So going forward to the colored people of South Africa, stop pointing a finger when you see black politicians fail and cause misery when it comes to corruption and maladministration across various spheres of government. When it's one of your own, you need to treat it with the same level of enthusiasm that you do on your black counterparts. So this is my call to all these fuckers who are supporting Danny Jordan. And also to the so-called colored sports celebs who are not saying a damn fucking thing, as well as to the minister, Gayton McKenzie. You need to hold these people to account. If no form of accounting is taking place here, then that means you are captured. Everyone is just fucking captured. I'm sorry to say it. If no form of accountability is going to happen here, then everyone is captured, just like the courts. But in this instance, for a person from the colored community, I'm not standing with this type of shit. I'm not. Because this is not the legacy that I intend those aspiring footballers and people that want to get into the governance structure of the South African Football Association should be embodying. This is not the type of man that I neither want these future leaders to become. On a more stinkier note, let's go to the situation in Hout Bay. Remember, Cape Town is rated as one of the top 10 best livable cities in the world. But let me take you to the stinking side of what things are and how they are pumping sewerage in your God-given ocean. Let's have a look at this article. So this particular article was written by groundup.org.za. And the person who wrote the article was Steve Kretzmann on the 18th of November 2024. Cape Town may pump as much sewage into the sea as it likes. That's the heading of the article. Now, the city of Cape Town has been releasing more sewage into the ocean from its Hout Bay marine outfall than its discharge permit allowed. So remember, there's a certain amount of metric tons that a municipality is allowed to pump through their wastewater management and sewage into the ocean. Now remember, if your permit allows you only to pump what? Let's just say 10 million metric tons, and you are pumping 17 million metric tons per day into the ocean. That means you are violating the permit that usually gets issued to these municipalities by the Department of Environmental Affairs. So in this particular instance, there's a legal side to it, and then there's also the factual side to it as well. Now we need to understand what is actually going on here, because it's disgusting. Milnerton Lagoon, I don't know if everyone or anyone knows Milnerton Lagoon. It was the most polluted waterway in the entire Western Cape. The lagoon itself has become so contaminated, it was classified as the most polluted water source in the Western Cape. Disgustingly indeed. And the weird part is that people are out there, the so-called activists and the so-called climate change fighters, and then your Progressive Caucus leader from the NCC as well, also stating that there's a pressure on infrastructure and the migrants from the Eastern Cape are taking jobs. Yes, people want to blame the migrants from other provinces causing the pressure on the infrastructure and therefore the lagoon becoming contaminated. No, that's not the case. It doesn't matter which city you come from and which province you migrate to. That pollution in that fucking lagoon was caused by the residents who are living there. All those neoliberals that have bought houses there, that are pumping filth into that lagoon, that are not flushing their things correctly, that are not disposing of certain things correctly, that led to the contamination and pollution in that lagoon. Disgustingly indeed, and yet you want to always blame the migrants. That is just another poor excuse of not taking accountability. Always looking for someone to fucking blame other than yourselves. The people that polluted that lagoon is purely based on the residents and homeowners living around that lagoon. Because no way in fucking hell you want to tell me that people migrate and tourists come seasonal, that because of tourists and migration that's not happening constantly, and due to the influx of people into the Western Cape that has caused pressure on the infrastructure and therefore resulted in the pollution. So therefore you're blaming the people outside of the Western Cape, outside of that lagoon area, for basically contaminating and polluting that lagoon. That's just fucking highly impossible. I don't buy that bullshit. That is just another narrative that wants to get formed so that the accountability doesn't fall on the people or the owners of those people that are living in that fucking area around that lagoon. So now on this particular instance of the permit, guess how much sewage they are pumping out into the ocean. Your God-given ocean. This is what the city of Cape Town does. In case anyone does not know this, I'm going to state this to you loud and fucking clear. So the city of Cape Town was granted permits to release sewage out to via sea pipelines in Hout Bay, Greenpoint and Camps Bay. Hout Bay, Greenpoint, Camps Bay. All your affluent areas, all where your neo-liberals are living. Hout Bay, Camps Bay and Greenpoint. The permits restrict the amount of sewage that may be released and limit the level of toxic elements such as mercury, cadmium and arsenic contained in the sewage. Appeals over the granting of the permits were lodged in November last year. In September, the new Environment Minister lifted the quantity restrictions on the permits pending the appeals. So in September, when the new Environmental Affairs Minister came into in September, when the new Environmental Minister lifted the quantity restrictions on the permits pending the appeals. This is now what the new minister decides to do. When they came into that portfolio, They lift the restrictions on the permits. That makes no fucking sense to me. Why? MACO member, mayoral committee member for water and sanitation, Zahid Badruddin, said the city is growing. Remember my uttering just a few moments ago about the influx of migrants and people, so therefore causing pressure on the infrastructure? This is what the MACO member for water and sanitation in the Western Cape says. Zaid Badruddin said that the city is growing and so are the volumes of sewage, and there was no other option at the moment. So therefore there's no other option to treat the sewage other than pumping that filth into the ocean. That is what the MACO member of the City of Cape Town for water and sanitation says. This is the bullshit right here. There is no other way to dispose of sewage other than pumping the shit literally into the ocean. Depending on how much sewage is released, it could exceed the marine environment ability to absorb it. Oh my fucking gosh. That last line. Depending on how much sewage is released, it could exceed the marine environment's ability to absorb it. So that means if you're pumping X amount of metric tons of sewage into the ocean, the marine's ability to absorb that waste, that threshold, might be exceeded. So therefore, if the marine life can only absorb that waste of a certain amount, when that sewage exceeds that threshold, that means the marine can no longer sustainably absorb the waste that is pumped into the ocean. How disgusting is that? The marine's environment ability to absorb it. Wow. Come on, man. Water and sanitation at the City of Cape Town. What are you people doing? MACO member, Mr. Zaid Badruddin. Come on. Do you think this is great on the environment? Do you think this is great? By pumping shit into the ocean and then making a fucking excuse for it, that pumping the sewage into the ocean might allow the marine's environment's capability of absorbing it to be exceeded. So in all fairness, we're going to have an overflow of shit and sewage in the ocean because guess what? You coons decided to pump more than what the permit is allowed. And now on top of it, with a minister from the GNU that came on board to run the portfolio, then lifted the restrictions. How convenient. The City of Cape Town, water and sanitation. Oh my fucking gosh. Maybe your shit stinks just like that shit that they're pumping into this ocean. I'm sure your shit stinks just as bad as that shit that is being pumped into the ocean. Mr. Badruddin. Any unlimited volume of untreated sewage is now allowed to be pumped out to sea by the City of Cape Town. Let me rephrase that. An unlimited volume of untreated sewage is now allowed to be pumped out to sea by the City of Cape Town, following a decision by Environment Minister Dion George. This was revealed in George's parliamentary reply to a question posed by Action SA MP Malebo Kobe on what steps the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment was taking against the City of Cape Town releasing more than 30 million litres of raw sewage into the marine reserves per day. Sure, I can just imagine the load of shit in those pipes. 30 million litres of raw sewage into the marine reserves per day. How disgusting is that, people? How disgusting is that? George, in his response in September, remember, he removed the restrictions on the permits, said that the Cape Town had coastal waters discharge permits for 3 marine outfalls, underwater pipes through which sewage is pumped into the ocean, situated in Greenpoint, Camps Bay and Hout Bay. The permits allow the city to discharge 25 million, 11.3 million and 5 million litres of sewage into the sea per day from each of these outfalls, respectively. The only treatment the sewage receives before being released into the ocean is to be pumped through a sieve to remove solids. Oh, I hope those solids are not shit solids. But the granting of these discharge permits would set limits on the volumes of sewage that can be pumped, as well as limits for elements such as nitrogen, mercury, and cyanide, amongst others. Interesting, cyanide. Have been appealed by the public and various organizations such as the National Sea Rescue Institute. So basically, the National Sea Rescue Institute appealed, along with other various organizations, appealed that the exorbitant amount of sewage must exceed the allotted amount as per the permits. They appealed this. The pumping of sewage, raw sewage, into the ocean. They appealed this. And yet, with all the stakeholders appealing this and the broader public, yet the Cape Town, or should I say the city of Cape Town, still believes that what they are doing is there is no other alternative for them to deal with raw sewage. So there's no way that they can recycle raw sewage. There is no way that they can figure out a way, environmentally friendly, environmentally smart, to get rid of solid waste. Because remember, waste is waste. When it's contaminated, it's even worse. As I mentioned, to those elements that are found in the sewage itself can affect the quality of the marine water. And that means if the quality of the marine water is affected, that means your ecosystem can be destroyed, because now you're actually pumping toxins into salt water. What's toxins going to do to the salt water? It's going to kill the marine life, because now the marine life is absorbing these toxins. Secondly, the ecosystem will collapse, and then on top of that, you will have a shitty waterway, or should I say, you will have a shitty ocean. Basically, all that raw sewage will just float, because guess what? The marine environment's capabilities, they won't be able to absorb that shit. So the 3 permits are all subject to ongoing appeals, as stated by Dion George. However, an interim decision was taken on the 28th of August 2024, in which the effluent quantity, in other words, flow, limits in the CWDPs, CWDP stands for Coastal Waters Discharge Permits, were suspended pending the outcome of the appeals. So therefore, the permits, CWDPs, they were suspended pending the outcome of the appeals. This was according to Dion George on the 28th of August 2024. He added that the City of Cape Town is not limited to the daily discharge limits. Meanwhile, the city had already been exceeding the sewage quantity limits set by the existing permits. Let's rephrase that. The city had already been exceeding the sewage quantity limits set by the permits. Like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, if you are only supposed to pump out 10 metric tons of sewage, now if you are exceeding that as per allocated on the permit, what the fuck are you doing? Why is there more shit being pumped into the ocean, other than what is prescribed based upon the permits? So now, due to the appeals, all these restrictions were lifted. So technically, you can pump as many sewage into the ocean as you please. That's like a rapist raping a woman, because you feel that is your rite of passage and it's your right, and you want to restore some form of dignity to a woman. You will just rape her and rape her and rape her and rape her and not give a damn about the long-term effects, the long-term trauma. Same thing can be said about sewerage. You keep fucking up the ocean, keep fucking up the marine life, keep pumping the raw sewage into the ocean. At some point, the marine life will become defenseless. They won't be able to absorb all of that shit that you just keep pumping. And on top of that, you have a minister that lifts the restrictions on these permits, therefore allowing the city to do this and manage this process freely without any restrictions. What is the City of Cape Town thinking? I mean, aren't they all about clean environment, green energy, renewable energy, clean roads, clean environment? Look at this shit right here. These fuckers are pumping raw sewage into the ocean, and yet they tell its citizens of the Western Cape that no, we're all about clean environments, and yet you're just pumping shit into the ocean. And it's not a little shit, it's a lot of shit. And guess where the sewage is being pumped? It's pumped in Camps Bay, Hout Bay, and Greenpoint. So, what about your mayoral committee member, water and sanitation? What are you doing about the situation? You just keep pumping shit left, right, and center. Now, with these restrictions that were lifted, automatically that guarantees the city of Cape Town to just continually pumping raw sewage into the ocean. We don't give a damn about the environment. Yes, Cape Town can be named one of the best 10 livable cities in the world. But yet, on the very same world-class city that all these tourists and all these, what's this magazine? They call it, what, Gateway, if I'm not mistaken, or Getaway? They love to publish all this propaganda about the Western Cape. That very same propaganda that you're publishing and for all these tourists to see, people don't know the real deal behind the scenes. That this very same world-class city is pumping raw sewage shit into the fucking ocean. And no one is talking about it. These are the fucking conversations that people should be having. These are the type of conversations that should be happening. But no, we want to focus on fucking DA and the ANC. Fuck the DA and fuck the ANC. They need to sort out their marriage in the GNU. However, when it comes to pertinent matters that affects our environment, that affects our economic capabilities, that affects our consciousness, these types of conversations should be heard. But guess what? Because it's the city of Cape Town, no one is going to say shit. And because it's Camps Bay, because it's Greenpoint, and because it's House Bay, no one is going to say shit. So all these climate change activists, they should actually be lobbying for these permits to be reviewed and potentially reduce the amount of metric tons. Surely with the Western Cape government and all its innovation, they can figure out a more smarter way of disposing of raw sewage other than pumping shit into the ocean. That very same ocean that you go swim in Hout Bay, that very same Greenpoint that you love to see the beautiful stadium and then you want to walk from there to the Sea Point Promenade. Just remember, that city that works for you is that very same city that's pumping the shit of you. So, in closing, according to Water and Sanitation MACO member Zahid Badruddin, the average discharge during the month of October 2024 was 1.8 million litres per day above the permit limit and was 700,000 litres per day above the permit limit for Greenpoint. The Camps Bay outfall remain well under the discharge volume limit. Let's go through those numbers again. October 2024, 1.8 million litres per day above the permit limit was pumped out of the outfall into the ocean, raw sewage. That was at Greenpoint. No, my humble apologies, that was Hout Bay. Then, at Greenpoint, it was 700,000 litres above the permit limit at Greenpoint. So yes, the more shit there is, the more they can pump into the ocean. Well, the appeals process seems very intense, but the permit for Hout Bay outfall was granted by the Department of Environmental Affairs and Fisheries in 2019, while the Greenpoint permit was granted in December 2022. The Camps Bay one was only granted in January 2023. Now, the city received the discharge permits. It did not notify the public and interested and affected parties, which effectively denied the public the right to appeal. Check out this. So the city received the discharge permits. It does not notify the public and interested and affected parties, which effectively denied the public the right to appeal. The matter only became known to the National Sea Rescue Institute, asked the city in January last year about the status of the permits. So technically, the city of Cape Town refused to inform the public and affected stakeholders. Due to this, it only came, or should I say, it only came into light when the NSRI inquired about this last year, January, about the permits. Then it only became public knowledge. But as for the permits being received, the city refused to consult the public about what they were planning to do. Wow! Talk about MACO member, Water and Sanitation. That's a nice way to govern a province, eh? It's a nice way to run a portfolio. Thank you for not disclosing the city's interest in this whole situation of discharging metric tons of shit into the ocean. The subsequent appeals to the Department of Forestry and Fisheries by the NSRI, Action SA, Cape Exit, Stefan Smith and Tracy Sat were on the basis that, among others, a sewage was being discharged into a marine protected area. Guess what? These motherfuckers are pumping shit into a marine protected area. Any other area but a marine protected area. Wow, that stinks. This led to the former minister, Barbara Creasy, ordering the city to conduct a new public participation process, which closed on the 21st of November last year. These appeals have still not been finalized. This is despite Creasy having stated in a 2023 decision to allow the appeals that the discharge of sewage into the ocean can have significant impacts on the environment and public health. Criminal case. Documents last year obtained by Action SA through the Promotion of Access to Information Act showed the city had violated the conditions of its permit for Houtbaai outfall by exceeding discharge volumes on 104 out of 181 days during the first 6 months of 2023. The city had also failed to establish a permit advisory forum, amongst other conditions of the permit. As a result, Action SA opened a criminal case against the city for contravening the Integrated Coastal Management Act. But the city wasn't just non-compliant with the Houtbaai outfall permit. George also revealed, the minister revealed that the Department of Forestry and Fisheries and Environmental Affairs had in February this year, prior to George being appointed minister, issued compliance notices to the city for contravening certain conditions of the permits for each of the city's 3 outfalls. So basically the department, the National Department, Forestry and Fisheries, issued compliance warnings to the city of Cape Town, and yet those notices were never adhered to by the city. He said, in respect of the Houtbaai outfall, a criminal case has been investigated and a docket sent to the National Prosecuting Authority. Wow. The NPA has failed to respond to questions about the charges and whether they will be prosecuted. Hey, another captured entity. Environmental concerns is that the 27th report commissioned by the CSIR, which of course was also commissioned by the city of Cape Town, the city in its presentation often refers, in its response to criticism of the marine outfalls, states that the negative impact of discharging sewage into the aquatic ecosystem depends on the ecosystem's assimilative, I don't know how to pronounce this word, assimilative capacity. Okay. The assimilative capacity is essentially a receiving environment's pollution diet. Wow, I never knew marine ecosystems have a pollution diet. Interesting. So basically, my shit is their marine pollution diet. Interesting. Oh, should I say pollution diet? It goes on to state that while the high-energy marine environment has a higher capacity to assimilate sewage than a sheltered water body such as estuary, of importance is the volume of effluent discharged. And then city growing, I mentioned that before. The MACO member said that the previous permits under the Department of Water and Sanitation granted in 2011 allowed up to 17.5 million litres of sewage to be pumped and discharged per day in Houtbaai, and up to 85 million litres per day off Greenpoint. Now, however, he said that the city is growing, so are people, and he said that they are looking at other options for the near future, but there is no indication that they will develop an alternative for the sewage not to be pumped at such a vast volume. So in all fairness, in closing, it doesn't matter how much you shit, as long as that raw sewage and that raw shit makes its way to the sewerage system, at some point they're going to keep pumping. And eventually your entire marine coastal area will be stinking. And guess what? These permits is not going to do shit. The city of Cape Town doesn't care. They do not care. If they genuinely cared about the affected parties and stakeholders' interests at play here, and potentially other stakeholders involved in this, they would have followed due course, public participation, as well as allow for any comments and allow for any objections. However, they do not. They don't care. They're all about enforcing their way and their interests on behalf of its citizens. So basically, they decide on behalf of affected stakeholders and parties involved that they will do as they please. And it's sad that Action SA had to actually take them to court and open up a criminal case of the violation of the Marine Coastal Management Act. That is just fucking sad. How dare the city tell us this is a world-class city, and on the very same end, they're pumping raw shit into the ocean. So much for the city that works for you. Lastly, in closing, to all my brown sisters and brown brothers out there, when any of your people are doing wrong, call them out on their shit. No one is perfect, but when you are caught with your hands in the cookie jar, don't be a hypocrite. Don't follow hypocrisy. Call them out on their shit. Don't act like just black politicians and black connected elite and black businessmen and BEE beneficiaries are always the ones feeding. It's your own colored people that are just feeding as much as the blacks. And when it comes to these types of things, colored people, you need to really stand the fuck up and call them out in this shit. The same with the city of Cape Town. This is a predominantly diverse province, but fuck me. The loyalty of colored people towards this municipality is alarming. This is like Taylor Swift setting up a concert at Greenpoint Stadium. The loyalty and the fans and the clout that these colored people have towards this municipality is alarming. These are the type of conversations that you should be having in your households, amongst your peers, amongst the locals. These are the type of conversations, because this goes against the grain of what the Western Cape should be. If we're all about cleaner things, then why are we not perpetuating that, and why are we not living up to those standards at the municipal level? But instead we want to tell all the tourists and everyone else, no, blacks are taking our jobs, the tourists are here, we are open for business. And in the very same end, this so-called world-class city is pumping shit in a marine protected area. Have this conversation in your school. Have this conversation in university. Talk about these things. But no, as colored people, they love the city of Cape Town so much. It's like their second wife or their second husband. I'm not a anti-city of Cape Town. I'm all about progression. I'm all about critical thinking. And I'm all about non-bullshit. Don't tell me that this is a world-class city and it's rated in the top 10 most livable cities in the world. Don't tell me that shit, because that very same city that is so highly rated by tourists and all these travelers, oh no, I call them colonial travelers, because majority of the people that come here to our shores are mostly coming from colonial countries anyway. And to those countries that do not want black people there, those are the colonial travelers that come here. They come here, they do all these ratings and indexes and place the city of Cape Town on the world map to say that we are a world-class city, but yet that very same world-class city is fucking destroying the very same environment that we're supposed to take care of, look after, and feed generations to come. Don't let that shit fool you. I'll tell you one thing. Thank you for listening, and thank you for visiting the plantation.